Hambini fans, and welcome to another episode of Hambini Reams. In today's episode, all the way from Florida, United States of America, that state where all the girls are hot, mainly because the average temperature is 23 degrees over the course of the year, are these Pitbull pedals. So Mike from Pitbull sent these over. He is a viewer of the channel and wanted me to ream them. He really wanted my engineering experience and to see how a random punter who doesn't get along with cycling got on with them. This is, I guess, the unboxing after the event. This is what you get. So this is how it turns up, and inside you'll get the manual. Now the manual they've adjusted since I kind of fed back to them about the spring tensions and things, which we'll come on to. But overall, there's no real issues with it. It's just a question of, you know, it's like fitting any other pedal. The big difference with these, and we'll come on to that straight away, is the way they retain the cleat. So this is the cleat. So they come in two different types. You've got a black and a grey one. You can see I've been using the black one. It's all scuffed from me walking around on it. This is the grey one. So this one is fixed. So the float adjustment in here is on this sort of back support section. So the grey one's completely flat. The black one is slightly, I guess that would be convex, not concave. So this bit here is slightly lower than the bit in the middle. So Mike from Pitbull sent two different styles of axle. So these will both go into your bike, depending on which one you get. But the retention system is the same. Now it's marketed as the fastest pedal system to engage with. I'll explain how this works. So this screws into your crank axle, into your crank, and this is on your shoe. And when you come into click, because this is, you know, direction independent, it doesn't have to be up or down or left or right, it's a circle, so it doesn't matter. You just literally click like that. Now there are a few little quirks with this. I've removed the spring from here just to make it easier for me to click in, but I'll show you with this one. So it clicks in like that, and then it's fully engaged. Now, one of the things that are little quirks with this is you can actually move this left to right. Now it's hard with my hands because I haven't got much force, but you've got 15 millimeters, I'd guess, maybe 10, of side-to-side movement. Now, not everybody will like that. Now, to disengage, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this, you literally just turn. I can't do it. It's easy enough when you're on the bike. You just turn and it'll disengage. Right, on the left, we've got the 0 degree float pedal cleat. So you can see it's completely flat. On the right, we've got the one with the 5 degrees, so that has a bit of rock on it. But I'm only showing you this just for the demonstration purposes. This one has the spring on it, and the method of adjusting the spring tension to adjust how easy it is to get in and out is fairly straightforward. So this is spring steel, and that literally just pushes up and down. Now, in order to adjust the preload on that spring, there is a grub screw that sits behind here. So I can show you on the grey one. And this Allen key goes in, and then you can adjust that by turning it in and out. So as you draw it out, it preloads the spring. So that's what that hole is there for. So you can adjust the tension one way or the other. Let's do some weights. So let's get this one out first. So this is the 0 degree float axle. That's how you get it out. And that is 228, 230 grams. Got the lighter weight model here, which is like 97 grams, so just under 100 grams. And then we've got the cleat, so I'll use the built-up cleat with the spring already loaded. And they're 33 grams, so depending on which one you get, so if you add 2 of these, you'd be looking at half a kilo there. And if you went for the lighter weight set up, you'd be looking at around 250, 260 grams there. So mechanically, this is actually quite an elegant thing. So it's a stainless steel body, which is why this is a bit on the heavy side. In fact, it's quite heavy. And then the axle runs underneath. There's a bearing on that side, so it's a thick, a very big bearing that controls your axial and radial load at the crank side. And we can get this off. That comes out. So this is the dismantled object. We've got a 19mm shoulder there, and then it's a 15mm ID bearing by the looks of it. It looks like a 6002. Probably stainless axle. I think it's stainless. And then you've got three, look like very small radial bearings towards the end with a pin that goes into the end. The fastening system looks to be a hex that's been broached. Servicing this will actually be very straightforward. You've just got to remove that circlip and then the 6002 should just come off. I mean, that is a really beefy bearing for this. That's not messing around at all. This one's the lighter weight pedal. Again, it's stainless steel. In order to take this apart, we'll have to grab that there, put an Allen key in there, and then undo this. So that screw just holds all this assembly together. You've got a spacer there. And this is the axle assembly. Now, the interesting thing to note on this is there is no bearing. So that it relies on what's known as hydrodynamic lubrication. So there's a film of grease that goes round and it keeps the two bearing surfaces apart. Quite a clever design, very, very nifty, quite impressive really. Given the amount of abuse that I've given this, there's no real dirt ingress into there at all. So, and that's why, because the grease has basically protected it and you've got no rolling element. Now, there are a couple of quirks with this setup, and one of the ones that really stuck its head out at me was the amount of float. So most pedal systems, you can adjust that amount of axial play. On this one, I don't know if you can see, there's probably, I'd say, 1/4 millimetre, 1/2 millimetre, so 250, 500 microns of movement. Now you can't actually get that out because it's fixed by these sizes, so you'd have to shim it to get it out. Now when you're pedaling, you can actually feel it. Well, I could feel it. So this one's the heavier duty one. Again, similar kind of thing, but this time the float's not as noticeable. You've got the bearing clearance inside that bearing that controls the amount you can move it left or right. So probably isn't apparent, but I mean, I can certainly feel it. Pop that axle into my vise and I put the DTI on top of it. Try to zero this as best I can. When you push up and down, you've got quite a bit of float inside the in the axle. Now I can feel that, but I don't know if that's me and my engineering mind looking for it when I'm pedaling. But it is quite noticeable that moved it there. The only real wear that I've had over the time I've been using it is on the axle. So this is, it looks to be stainless steel. It's stainless steel is quite soft, so it's scratched into there a bit, and from walking around also damaged the cleats, but I mean that's to be expected. This is the Pitbull pedal installed on the bike. This is the carbon one. On this side is the Pitbull. On the far side is a Shimano SPDSL. You can actually run them together, and I have done that because I didn't find any difference in the stack height. Well, I couldn't tell a difference anyway. So this is it installed. There's nothing really too overtly complicated with this. There's a hex in that side and you just screw it in. This is how to engage it. And this is how to disengage it. It's very, very straightforward. These are my Bontrager XXX shoes. I've had them for a long time. They've been hammered. And these are the pitbull cleats attached to it. There's nothing too elaborate in terms of fixing. There's two cap-head screws down here, which are, I think it's standard, is it M4, M5, whatever it is. And then behind here is a countersunk M4 or M5 screw, and then it screws on. There's plenty of adjustment in there, so I've got them just literally straight up. There's not really much to say about them. They just fit. I mean, this is a bit of a wearing component. You can see that, you know, I've been walking around in these, so they do get scuffed, but you've got plenty of wear before you actually get to the gubbins of it. So you'd have to wear through sort of 2 or 3 millimeters of plastic before you'd have compromised engagement. On the ball, there's not really, on the front, there's not really much in the way of wear. Again, that doesn't really impact your pedaling stroke. It's all in here, and that's quite well protected. It's quite a clever design, I think. A big shout out to today's video sponsor, which is ExpressVPN. Have you ever been away and wanted to get to watch those TV shows that you're used to watching, you know, on a weekly basis, like Hairdressing World UK or Banging Hairdressers of Slovakia? Well, with ExpressVPN, that is no problem. You just dial up ExpressVPN, press a button, and bingo, your favorite TV shows are available again. But even better than that, ExpressVPN is an encrypted connection, so it's like a tunnel, so no one is going to be able to realistically see where you are or what you're watching. You might think, well, why is that important? Well, you know that I like to get out and get my hair cut a lot, and that can be a problem if you've got multiple hairdressers on the go. The first hairdresser might get a bit irate and then cut the wrong bit off, and then you'll need to get ExpressVPN to get that pen working again. If you want to get ExpressVPN, use the link below, and the first 3 months will be free. Now it is that time of the month again. No, not that time of the month. It is the time of the month. It is time for PowerPoint. Today, I couldn't really think of anything. I was so happy because the pen is working. In fact, I've had to take some Viagra to stop me peeing on my shoes in my infantile age. By Hambini, age 5. Remember to check out the website. I now have dealer stuff. So if you're a dealer and want to be stocking Hambini stuff, remember to check on there. Patreon and Hambini Eng on Crapstagram. This is the Pitbull website. I think, well, they've actually got 3. You keep clicking and you get to another place. This is all about their pedals and stuff like that. You can actually go, oh, this is their sort of feedback and where they've been featured, all that kind of good stuff. This video down here is quite good because it shows you how to, well, it shows you a video of him clipping in and out while he's riding, which is something that I hate doing because typically when I ride with no hands, I fall off. This is the Shopify website or BigCommerce, and it explains or details everything that you can buy from them. So one thing I would say with this is because it's quite a simple design, you can get everything for it. So you can get the cleats, the axle, even the fitting kit, all of that. The pedal that I would actually go for is the KOM pedal. So the big fat one, the heavy one, is the training pedal. The KOM pedal, if you're going to go for it, I think is the better one. Now, there have been a few changes made since I fed back to them, which is actually a very good thing. The first is, and this is a big one I think, they changed the instructions because I did point out some of the features that they claimed were in the instructions didn't quite marry up. So the spring tension and faffing around with all that, they've rewritten all of that. I haven't seen it, but they've gone about doing that. It also said the axle is going to become chrome plated and hardened. So that's a good thing in my opinion. There's only really one thing that I picked up on. Well, a couple of things. I mean, the first was the ability to move left and right to adjust your Q factor on the fly. I'm not too keen on that. The other is the preload. So the preload system, I mean, this is just a generic picture of preload, but I mean, this is a bearing that's been sliced in half. And what that shows is typically when you apply preload, you load up the bearing across an axis. And this angle here is called the contact angle, and that's called beta basically. Now in practical circumstances, or the theory behind this, I've taken the same bearing and we've sliced through it. You've got a small gap between the, this is the outer raceway and this is the inner raceway, or inner race. You've got a small gap between that and the balls. And that's called the bearing clearance. It's measured in typically microns, so 10 or 15 microns, whatever it is. As the bearing gets bigger, that bearing clearance will also get bigger. The other thing is bearings are usually quoted in like CN, C2, C3. CN is just normal clearance. It's not usually specified on the box. C3 is typically what enduro bearings are, and I think ceramic speed, but they don't quote them because they don't tend to follow ISO standards strictly. This gap, which if I just go and sort of do 2 lines there, that gap there is your bearing clearance. If you actually go and put that into real life, you've got a bit of play in the bearing, and you can usually feel that play. It's not very much, very, very small, but that needs to be taken out. If it's not taken out, what you get is you get the bearing that's shuttling from side to side. So here, if I draw the axis in here, this isn't a very good example because I've exaggerated it considerably, and the bottom left is not good at all. The axis of contact is like that. So that angle there is your beta contact angle. This bit here, that wouldn't happen in real life. It's because I made the bearing clearance too big. So that's in one scenario. Let's say you're putting your foot down. Now when you go and pull your foot back up, what you can have is this thing on the right hand side. So now the ball has moved from one side to the other, and the contact angle, it probably remains the same. It's beta contact angle, but you're now on this side of the bearing as opposed to this side of the bearing on this one. Now, if you take a look at Shimano, look, even the Speed Play, they all load up against one side. So the easiest way to do that is if this bearing was, let's say, fixed, this drawing is crap in it. What you do is you typically just put a load of shims in here, which will be a displacement preload or a wave washer or something like that, just to push that way, and that will load it up that way. Okay, if you're coming back the other way, then you've got the spring constant of the wave washer to push up against, or if you've got metal shims or some sort of shims or something like that, you've got the stiffness of that to go up against. For example, if you watch the Speedplay video, or Wahoo Speedplay video, you can see that they've actually used an O-ring to assess some of the preload. Novel way of doing it, and I think it's quite clever, to be honest. The other part on the KOM pedal is the way that it's lubricated. So it's using a form of hydrodynamic lubrication. So there's a center spindle and the outer spindle around it, and it's filled with grease. Now I've just lifted these pictures just straight off the internet, but it's to sort of show you what's going on. So in here it says oil wedge, but you could just replace that with grease. So if you fill that all up with grease and then spin it, you end up with an oil wedge or a grease wedge that's around the bottom. That is typically, normally in sort of high-speed machinery, you'd go for an oil clearance of about 0.1 millimeters, 0.1 to 0.15, so 4 to 6 thousandths of an inch. That is usually force-fed lubrication, so an oil pump is providing that. So in your car engine, those of you who are still polluters, there'll be oil clearances all the way through big end bearings, main bearings, that kind of thing, and that's just keeping the metal parts apart. The thing with that is hydrodynamic lubrication is extremely powerful. There are two reasons for this. The first is, theoretically, you will never get any wear because the metal never touches the other piece of the metal. Okay, in reality, it does scrape a little bit, but in rolling element bearings, they're usually in constant contact because it's relying on Hertzian contact stress. Now, to displace an oil wedge, you need some serious force. It has to be massive for it to go. It's, you know, you can't just squish it down. You're basically trying to squish oil down. It's just not going to happen. Now, a practical example of hydrodynamic lubrication is when you're watching F1 and the car aquaplanes. So you've generated enough forward force, and that is enough, if you take a look at this one, this picture here, to lift the car or the tyre away from the ground, and then the car is just basically off on its way to the scene of an accident. This 3 pictures on the top right hand side just show you the load rating or the loading. So when it's static, so you've got no load, no forward speed, you know, the load is just going down. When you apply load, it just tends to creep up through the through to a corner. So it's still not, you know, in that position. We've now moved, so you've now got a bit of a gap there. And then when you're in the free, you know, complete running condition, you end up with a pressure distribution that looks like that, and that is what's holding up the shaft. Right, questions and comments. There is a web page with more data in the description, hambini.com. Remember to comment and, you know, tell me what you think of these pedals, and follow me on Cactusgram. And as always, keep banging your hairdresser.